again, which is why we're still sitting here with this particularly gruesome scene in front of us. The reason I think that there's going to be more action is there is one very large white-backed vulture standing off to the side. I'm not sure whether he or she has had the opportunity to feed just yet, but it is probably going to come in and try once again. And the longer we sit here, the more comfortable and relaxed the other vultures will be, and the more they will start moving in. And of course, I also want to make sure that there's no white-headed vultures about, because I still haven't seen one here. Everybody else has seen white-headed vultures, and I haven't, and I'm starting to feel slightly left out. There's also always the possibility of a Cape vulture, which is a vulture that is far more endangered than the white-backed vulture, although all vultures, of course, are vulnerable. But the Cape vulture, they live more in the rocky areas of the country, so they nest in cliffs and crags around the Drakensberg Mountains, but they do occasionally fly over into this area. And a vulture can cover hundreds of kilometers during just a couple of days and months. So it's entirely possible that we could see a Cape vulture. I've seen them here before, and that would be something special for some of you to add to your bird lists. Unfortunately, though, for now, we've only got the white-backed vultures. And Cape vultures are fractionally larger and slightly more dominant at kills, so we'd know almost immediately if we were seeing a Cape vulture just by its behavior alone, rather than a white-backed vulture. They do, however, look relatively similar. You know, the animators of the Jungle Book got things very right in the way that they animated the body language of the 4 vultures in that. There we go. Things seem to have settled now. There's a bit of a scrap, but nothing major. Oh, incoming. Plonk. There's an audible thud there as that vulture landed. When vultures are very hungry, that's when you truly get to see the massive conflict between them, and you occasionally get 50 to 60 vultures fighting and squabbling for position at a carcass. This is a relatively tame vulture sighting. James, you read my mind. One of my favorite things to do, of course, when talking about bird calls is to do a literal reading of the bird calls of this area, as written by ornithologists in my bird book. James, I'm sorry to disappoint you. The description of vultures is rather sad. Not sad, just slightly disappointing and not nearly as amusing as I thought it might be. It's described as harsh cackles and hisses. The end. So none of the words put to it or anything as exciting as we have experienced with some of the other birds that we've read done literal reading of bird calls. For example, I can't remember which was the one that was so funny. I think it was the puffback shrike that had a click or something. It was highly entertaining. But no, the vultures is slightly disappointing. I also tried to get the call of the yellow-billed kite that we saw earlier, and it says similar to black kites. And black kites is just a high-pitched whistling, shrill whinnying. So there you go. Somewhat disappointed in my literal reading of bird calls this morning. Sorry, James. I did try, though. I did try. Okay, well, these vultures are being relatively contained in terms of their interaction with each other. I'm not sure if Mike is coming. Sorry. I see. Did we drop something? Or was that them? No, that was them. Vultures, of course, whilst not pretty, form a very, very important function in the ecosystem that is the African bush. And that, of course, is the rubbish collecting service that they perform. essentially clearing away carcasses so that it contains or helps to contain the spread of disease. Now, Ruth, you want to know if they will feed off a carcass that is diseased. Yes, they will. Vultures have one of the most incredible immune systems in the world that make them resistant to almost everything that they could contract out here, including, evidence seems to suggest, including anthrax. So what often happens is they clear up the carcass, and that's a good thing, but occasionally the first thing, despite the look of them, they actually attempt to be quite sanitary birds. And so what they'll do is after they feed, they go and they wash themselves off in a nearby river or a pool of water where they can actually clean away the muck from their feathers. And that unfortunately occasionally contributes to the spread of disease in the water. That's relatively unusual, though. So yes, they will feed on diseased carcasses. Other animals seem to have an uncanny instinct when they should not be feeding off a particular carcass, and they tend to avoid it, but vultures are not concerned by that at all. The difficulty is they can't get into the carcass properly. Their bills just aren't strong enough. What they need is a lappet-faced vulture, which is essentially the tin opener of the bush, with a far more solid beak or bill that they can actually use to rip open the carcass. So every vulture has its function. The white-backed and the Cape vultures tend to be sort of general feeders of the majority of the meat. But it is the lappet-faced that really, truly does an amazing job of breaking open the carcass with its massive bill. And then, of course, the hooded vultures come in between like toothpicks and get the bits in the middle of the bones. Now, Saturn, you want to know how long it will... The sound effects of these birds flying, it's truly astounding, that whoosh, 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 whoosh. Sorry, Saturn. You want to know how long it takes a vulture to clean up a carcass. It really depends on how many vultures there are in the area and how many of them find the carcass. Once you get one vulture that has found the carcass, then others are guaranteed to arrive. They've got such good eyesight, and they know where one vulture has gathered, it might be time worth investigating that particular spot. I've seen them clean, and, well, we haven't actively seen it, but we had an Inyala kill not too far away from where we are now that nothing fed off, and the vultures cleaned it up in a day. The Inyala is a little bit smaller than a buffalo carcass. And then we've got that carcass at Buffelshoek Dam, which just goes to show exactly what the problem is where a vulture can't get into a carcass, because they've not really bothered to feed on that at all. They have fed on it, but they obviously couldn't get into the carcass in a way that was productive for them to stick around and to feed. Right, we're going to move on and leave